Okay.
Hi guys, welcome back to episode 8. I know we've been gone
Welcome.
a month, but it feels like we've been gone for 4 months. So much is happening, from
4 weeks,
Elon.
right? It's just been 4 weeks, and
I'm telling you, it feels like we haven't recorded in probably 6 months. The amount that's happened in the last month and like last 2 weeks. Elon sending data centers to space with Google. Anthropic is now friends with Elon. We'll come to that.
I know
It's getting quite
it's
interesting.
it's wild. It's graduation season for myself. For me, I just came back from my daughter's graduation, and super happy to have to have been part of that, and now just basking in that glow. But yeah, I mean, as usual, stuff has been happening all over again, seemingly at a faster pace than even we can keep track of. We like to, do one episode every 4 weeks, and sometimes that feels right. And this time again, 4 weeks is too long of a gap, but we should just jump right into it.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I think
hopefully, by the time we release, it won't be outdated.
yeah, I hope not. We discussed a little bit last week on what we wanted to talk about, and then we got to this week and we were like, okay, we'll have to figure out some new topics.
New
So I
topics.
think I think we should talk about the most important thing right now, and in our day to day lives, which is changing, is the introduction of T3 code mainly. I tried it a while ago. I found that it wasn't for me unless I was working on multiple projects and stuff. And said you really got into it, and I think
Yeah,
let.
I've really enjoyed using it for 2 weeks now. I think it's starting to become more of a part of my day to day workflow. The reason I like it is that it's again a single destination. It's sort of what I lost when I moved away from Cursor and IDEs in general and into Claude Code. Claude Code was great, but I had to basically have my context and my projects all strewn around in various shell prompts. And of course, there was what's the desktop version that tries to solve this problem that sucks. I mean, I've not used it, so I can't.
Claude app, the Claude
Yeah, the
Code app.
Claude app is, it is what it is. I'd rather not have to install another app. What I really like about,
Quite, quite, it's quite a piece of work. At
yeah,
least,
yeah, and I trust Evia enough to not, want to go and try it out. But what I like about T3 is not just what it includes, but what it's actually consciously decided to leave out. um, I usually make it a point to go and look at the sort of open issues and the discussions. And T3 is very active. We've got a lot of passionate users. There's a lot of discussions. There's threads. It's because it's almost 2 years old now, at least a year old. I really like Theo. He's clearly very thoughtful, articulate, well spoken. I think he's a smart guy. Um, so yeah, what right off the bat, what I love about it is that it's all it's chat. It's one place to sort of manage everything. Um, it's put thoughtful use into being ergonomically designed. So frequent actions get buttons, but everything else is just a prompt. I like that you can sort of track where your context window is. It's a lot easier to configure the underlying coding harness. In my case, I've been using, I would say, at about 50% loading both GPT 5.5 Codex and Claude with 4.6 with a million window context. It's easy because it exposes all these dials that require that you have to basically do a slash command and a config command. It's
yeah, the effort, and
Yeah, so it's nice. Again, those are not the reasons why I like it. I like it because it's the single place where I can return to after six, whether it's 5 hours or 5 days. I know that I can go back to this place and I can pick up exactly where I left off, which I think is an important part of doing any work, right? It's being able to literally pick up exactly where you pick up mid sentence if you need to, and resume. And so I like that, and I think I'm going to make that the requirement for any future coding harness or IDE that I use is being able to essentially pick up where I left off, not having to have the coding agent or the underlying LLM, um, have to reread the context. And so context gardening is still something that we talked about, like what, 4 episodes ago? That was 4 months ago. It feels like four
Yeah.
lifetimes ago. Still super important. Still nobody's
Yeah,
cracked it.
I think it's there. Context gardening doesn't go away.
It
I
doesn't
think
go away. And yeah, everyone, these are all tools that help you manage it better. So yeah, I think T3 is something that I feel is an evolution, as you've said, of your of the coding harness, and it's an evolving space. I think, yeah, go ahead. What do you think of T3 code? You've been using it a lot more than me.
yeah, so the day T3 code came out, I started using it. I tried it out because, for me, I've evolved in quite a lot of different things. Like our workflow has evolved quite similarly. But one thing I really liked about Claude Code was the ability to use, the hooks I have in place, the way I've got the different agents configured, and the sub agent swarm or whatever we call it. Like you're having multiple sub agents being able to do different things. So from an implementation point of view and getting something ready, I still prefer just a single terminal window, because if I'm starting a fresh project, I want nothing there. I want to build it out, and then when you're maintaining or building out a project, yes, I prefer T3, because then you can have multiple threads. Like I'm working on one aspect, I'm working on a different aspect, I'm working on the third aspect, and that way I don't have to keep running up these terminal windows, which I used to have to do. But the initializing of the project, I really like just a single window where I can have Opus and I can have Codex. And I've been leaning a lot more towards Codex 5.5. I really like my primary is still 4.5 because of how fast it does it, and it's equally intelligent as 4.6 in that thing. But I think where
You
we're
mean Claude, just to be clear for everyone. So Claude 4.5 and Claude 4.6 are your
4.6.
primaries.
Yeah,
And
so those are, I think 4.5 is my primary. I use 4.6 for more UI work and stuff. But the main thing is that I like the initial harness, just the Cloud Code harness, just to get things started. Build the frame, get everything in place. And then from there, all the iterative changes, I move completely to T3 code, because there I have a timeline, I have everything, what changes I made. It's easy to make multiple different changes, but multiple different small changes with 3 4 different agents. I can use gpd 5.5 in one thread, I can use Opus in one thread, I can use even connect. You can even connect open code and use the multitude of models they have right now. DeepSeek is a good one. So it just makes it very easy to work on existing projects. I think for new projects, I find it a bit difficult to set it up on T3 code. Sorry, because I'm probably just not as comfortable. It's like a skill issue. I don't think I'm comfortable with it, and I'll be open to say that I haven't probably used it enough, or it's a different thing. That's why. But overall, I think the way the coding harness is evolving is to think these buttons which are there, which are very important, like the commit and push button on T3 code, or quick action buttons, which are very useful rather than you having to put a prompt in every time. Because sometimes you really just want it done in the background. You press a button and it's done. And if you're doing it so much, it's like it's better than typing, and you have something dedicated which is going to give you the output you want.
yeah, yeah, I mean, I think those buttons are useful. They're not the main reason why I think T3 code is powerful. Is T3 code is just, it's again this week, and we'll come to what's happened. The postscript, which is a precursor to our Claudemption section. And sorry if I stole your thunder, but I'll let you define that term in a second because it's your term. But uh, the reason T3 code for me matters is all the things that you said. Having a single place to go to, having a timeline, creating new threads. I almost started to create new issues for T3 code to say, look, I need to be able to do subthreads, because again, the way that coding happens in general, at least it has been for the last 25 years that I've been practicing it, is you do get sucked into rabbit holes. So you're sort of you're making progress towards the final goal, but it's never a straight line. It's always, you take sort of these detours, rabbit
Sometimes you
holes.
do a U-turn and then you go in
You
a circle.
sometimes it's a U-turn. And
It's
of
like a
course,
circle and then you come back up.
exactly, the Claude code guys will tell you, oh, it doesn't matter now. You, because coding is free, you can create Git work trees and just have five different versions of your idea. And I was listening to a very interesting talk by the manager for the Claude Code team. So she's an ex Meta sort of Microsoft person, very, clearly very well spoken. But her point that she was making was that, look, coding is no longer the bottleneck, and so the other term she used, which was, again, she was trying to basically coin these phrases that people would remember, was, code is truth. So essentially the point is, instead of arguing over a whiteboard, apparently what the Claude Code team does now is to say, we're just going to code it up because it takes 15 minutes to build the prototype, maybe not 15. I'm making up a number. It takes hours, not days. So if you have two competing ideas inside,
You
and
just
there's,
test them in production. You
you
don't
just
even.
you literally just prototype the whole thing, and then you let the code, the behavior of the code, sort of be the ultimate arbiter of how something is actually, acceptable or not. So again, not sure if I fully agree with it. I mean, clearly all of this stuff, especially when you go to these conferences, they just want you to use Claude, right? It's all about saying the platform is so good, we need you to use more tokens. So it's very hard to separate some of the hype from the actual reality. But what I did get out of it was the fact that, uh, you know code away and don't worry about the outcome, because you basically.
And I've started to not agree with that thing because it's actually making plans less precise. What I've started noticing is, and you'll see it, I use an app called Deliveroo, and they used to have this really nice banner for the offers. Now they've made them these pills, and I can tell it's very simply just somebody had an idea and they're just testing it with the customers, and it's very LLM coded AI design, UI design. Like
Yeah.
those pills which you see, those rounded pills which look exactly like what Opus 4.6 does with its what do you call it, UI plugin, front end design plugin. So I'm noticing these changes in real time. There's issues coming up. They're making them less user friendly because the thought that goes into each design, or the thought that goes into elements, is going away. It's like, okay, let's just make 10, choose whichever looks the best, and go that way. And it's a feeling. I don't. It's not a fact that it's happening, but this is what I feel like is happening in the industry because the effort which went into thought, design, care is actually going away because they can just build up 15 different mock UIs in 20 minutes, and then you'll be like, okay, this one looks the best, let's just go with this. That there is the science behind it. There's that personal touch, there's that fact that where you sit, you plan, you make sure that it's right, you agree on the ideas. It's also like a team building exercise, I think. The fact that you don't get to debate, you don't get to fight on those ideas, you don't get to raise your voice, all of those things which are very important in an environment, a working environment, I feel, because it builds camaraderie, it builds your team. That's the relationship you have with your team. That let's say Boris in the Cloud Code team is good at something, you know Tarek is good at something, they're all good at something else, right? But when you're just building by yourself and you just say, okay, we built this prototype, which one do you like the most, you don't really get to highlight what people are very good at. You don't understand through work, you don't understand through the process, how people think. It's very important because in the long run, when you're trying to build something sustainable, you're building something which is, you care about, in terms of any piece of software. We plan it probably so much, every button, what's happening, how do we like it. Even on a prototype, we're looking at it, we're looking at the theme, we're caring about, we discuss it before we make the changes. And I feel like that's so important because you have a perspective on it, I have a perspective on it, and sometimes, when we talk about it, we find a middle ground. If we build the two perspectives and you just take the two, you don't
Yes.
get the benefit of both.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the thing that's become obvious to all of us now, in our moments of flow. I mean, I certainly feel very productive when I run a Ralph loop and I generate 10,000 lines of code or whatever. Not, I don't think I've generated as many. I think I haven't beaten your record. I've probably gone up to maybe 300,000 tokens on one session. Um, uh, but I think in my gut, I feel like we're losing the ability to have even a two human person team collaborate on a project, which is really bothersome to me. I mean, Guinness and my partner Guinness and I have been writing code and developing code together for at least 10 years now. And we are having trouble. We are usually so much in sync. We practically complete each other's sentences when we speak to a third person. He's usually basically, he and I usually literally thinking the exact same
And
thing.
I
It's kind
and
of
I
funny.
think we'll have Guinness on soon, so you can
We will, absolutely. And you'll
see
see,
how he
he's a,
thinks, because
he's
he's
a younger and cooler version, I think, of me. But
no.
I think what really keeps me up at night is we're all going to just go into our silos. We'll all become, us and the agent, and or agent swarm, and we'll all be building alone, right? And that's bad because something, as you said, something intangible is going to get lost. And honestly, we will not realize what's been lost until much later. So, like, right now, everyone's just so busy.
That's what I value in, whenever we're even thinking about, let's say, what to talk about or what to research, because you do a lot of work behind the scenes, to look at things, to understand how things are being built, our workflows, what we're building, away from just the moving targets, in our consultancy aspect, or our business, or our development business. The one thing which I always like to do is, before anything, I take Sid's opinion. It's this second nature, where even if I'm drafting a basic document on, outlining what we've done, how we've done it, there's always that input. I always like Sid to read it before I send it, because that collaboration, we're a team, and at the end of the day, that's what you don't want to lose, because the beauty of it, before we got so into Claude Code and Codex and how everything's moving now, let's say September, when we started this, it was very offline. We had ChatGPT, but it was very offline. It was very hands-on. It was, it's still hands-on, but you're losing that little bit of, I can just build this in 5 seconds. We've thought of so many things. We built this, and I think it's the burden of building. I think that's what we're gonna face soon. Is that too many, ideas will no longer be in short
Valued.
in
Well,
short
yeah,
supply.
ideas and collaboration and being able to see another viewpoint, these are not skills that Claude Code is going to help you
No,
sharpen.
never.
Claude Code, even when its temperature is set to zero, is is a sycophant. It's going to say amazing idea to every idea you propose, and it's not going to push back like a human might. It doesn't have its own opinion, right? Let's not kid ourselves. This is a machine. This is not even a machine. It's a generative AI. It's a prediction engine, right? That's all it does. It's obviously nicely harnessed, and it's got a loop, and it's got a whole bunch of checks and balances to make it sound like it's doing, using stuff. And it definitely is a marvel of engineering. No, I'm not taking anything away from the Claude engineering team, but it cannot be a stand-in for an actual human with opinions, because it's not opinionated. It just cannot be. It's not. It's
And
just
you also have to understand, as a user, they want you to feel good. When
yes, yes.
when you're
That's
using a product, they want you to feel good. They want you to feel smart. They want you to feel like you are on top of the world, like you have the superpower, because that's how you get addicted. That's how you get addicted. That's how you stay in that subscription. That's how you burn more tokens. So you have to
it.
understand that everything you see in this race is also a lot to do with keeping you hooked. It's like anything else. It's like a reel, it's like a short, it's like TikTok, it's like everything else. At the bottom of it, they need you to stay hooked. They need you dependent on them, for them to generate maximum value, to be able to grow. And that's what's happening with Anthropic. Anthropic is growing at a masterful speed. And that's where we can come to the Claudemption, or the
Yes,
short Claudemption.
short,
Claudemption.
extremely short-lived.
So, uh, last week, Anthropic and Elon came together. SpaceX AI, now known as SpaceX, previously an XAI. That old training cluster, which is Colossus One, which has H100s, H200s, and GB 200s and 300s, 220,000 GPUs, 300 megawatts of compute, was given to Anthropic completely. Because SpaceX AI is moved to Colossus 2, which is far larger, far shinier, with all of the latest Blackwell GPUs. and they're looking to go over 1 million GPUs on that one. So that actually caused Anthropic to double people's 5 hour limit, make it much more better for all the people using Claude. You know, now beyond whatever were the limits before and the problems they were having, the constraints with compute. And we were very spot on in saying that compute was the problem with everything else. What the
I
performance.
have to say yes. The if you looked at the status dot Claude dot page, the Claude status page, which was a separate dashboard, it should have looked like a green strip, but it was usually just green, red, red, red,
It
yellow,
was
yellow,
orange.
yellow, red, yellow. At any given time, it was there is some degradation in the API. It was literally looking more congested than I-85, which I live next to in Atlanta. Three times, 3 to 6 hours a day, it's backed up. So yeah, I think yeah, go on. I think the Claudemption was a perfectly encapsulated uh, term because they were desperate. They needed. I mean, they probably saw this happening weeks, if not months ago. Avya, you've obviously kept a lot closer eye and ear to the ground. People were complaining about how uh, Claude was getting dumber. The more performant models were actually, forgetting a lot of shot. There was a lot of catastrophic forgetting happening. There was a lot of quantization, even though people couldn't prove it because it's obviously all hidden.
I think
Um,
it wasn't forced quantization. It just happens when a model GPUs run too hot, your performance is going to be lower. And when
yeah,
you're overloading that many GPUs, what happens is, even if you're not doing anything, take your laptop, run it hot.
correct.
No, it's going to run worse.
Yes,
So even if they're not doing anything, it's the load they had. So the model
that's
probably
right.
behaving worse. So once they've got that, they doubled rate limits and everything. And magically, today, on the 13th of May, they have
A week
done.
later, right? Less than a week later after Claudemption happened, and people were
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
after we
fine."
thought of this, they have completely screwed over most of the people in the plans, the Pro, the Max, and the Pro and the Max, the 5x, 20x, and the Pro plan. And what they've done is taken away usage which you had from your plan and limited it to $100 of API usage on the agent SDK, Claude-P, which is not interactive, so similar to the Ralph loop where you can do Claude-P and then you put in one prompt, it gives you the answer and it closes. So that's gone. And a lot of different uses of this are gone now. So a lot of third-party harness uses, which were open with the Claude through the Claude agent SDK. So people are very unhappy about it, and I think it's very scummy by Anthropic to do this because they're trying to limit everybody to their harness and their, you know, one singular terminal. And I think in the coming days, I think they're going to try and move off the terminal also and go straight to the Cloud app. I have a feeling that this is coming, and I've had a bad feeling about this because they keep trying to get you on there through Ultra Plan, through something or the other, and I don't want the Claude code, the terminal, going because that's actually
Yeah,
one of the good pieces of software that they have.
yeah.
Other
I
than that,
wish, yeah, I wish they'd just take a page out of. They should review history and then I mean I've worked at enough startups in the US. One of my old bosses, who probably heard it from his old boss, used to say, you know, if you do one thing well, don't screw it up, right? Like if you're doing something and you've got basically people loving one of your products or one of your use cases, it's really really hard to get there, right? But if you have it, don't f it up, right? Don't screw it up, right? um, it feels to me like clearly they're driven by trying to create this ecosystem, trying to be Microsofty. And again, all apologies to Satya and everybody else who's trying to make Microsoft less Microsofty, but Microsoft has always been about lock-in, keeping you inside the ecosystem, keeping it close. To some extent, Apple did it as well, but Apple, to their credit, switched from their own OS to a BSD type OS, so that it was a lot easier to sort of run open source code that compiles on Linux on Apple, with some exceptions. I mean, their drivers are still sort of weird, but the point is that somehow there's this impulse. inside Anthropic to say, we've done this one thing well, maybe we'll do everything well. So we'll be able to build agent harness, we'll be able to build an agent SDK really well, right? Our desktop app is also going to be amazing. So of
Yeah.
course we're giving people everything they want because that's all they want. No, people want choice. And if you take that choice away from them, even if they love your product, they'll eventually start using.
And I think this is happening in a lot of ways with us as well. I'm moving to GPT 5.5 for most things. You're moving to GPT 5.5, and
Yeah,
I think that once we go that way, it took a lot for us to move from OpenAI to Anthropic right at the start.
yeah.
Opus 4.5 was a big jump. We tried it out, we liked it, and since then we've been loyal to Anthropic because we trusted them because of the way Opus 4.5 performed. And to this day, I still believe that Opus 4.5, even in this current environment, is one of the better performing models. It performs better. Forget what the benchmarks say, forget what anybody else says. I'm telling you, code generation, and we did Centrux and everything. My builds with Opus 4.6 have cleaner code than the new models. I can feel it. I know it works better.
Yeah.
And GPT 5.5 is even a cut above that. GPT 5.5 is making probably the best code out there right now for a model.
I was blown away with this with the sensor the rate that I got with GPT 5.5. It took a little longer. GPT 5.5 is like you said, it's the perfectionist. It tends to be, you have to be a little bit more patient with it because it takes its time. It's a little bit more of a plodding model, but the code it generates actually has sort of sticks to the basics, and not to the basics, it sticks to the fundamentals a lot better. And so I think Centrux is just this really cool open source library we found. It's completely deterministic. It's written entirely in Rust, and it just basically reads your entire code base and gives you a number, right? It's a number from 0 to 10,000. Higher is better. And it scored above 9,000, right? I coded something from scratch using GPT 5.5. Now, granted, it was mostly a more of a shell type of repo, less. So there was a lot of shell code, shell script, and there was a lot of Docker. But still, I feel like it was able to get these high marks really quickly. And for a while, I was like, wait a second, is GPT paying the Centrux guys? You never know these days, right? Like, I mean, you have to have healthy skepticism.
They're not bribing them, but like the code it writes is generally genuinely very, very good. I've seen GPT 5.5, not even a high, you don't even need a high. Like with even Medium, I was using Medium the other day, and it writes very good code. I
Yeah.
find it's slow, it takes its time, but it writes very, very good code. And what I've felt like doing is going through our existing projects and going through it with GPT 5.5 and refactoring it, to get it to a better centric score. But I'm saying our initial projects, which weren't hardened, like we hadn't put enough work into it, we haven't even looked at much of the code on them. And I'm saying they were scoring very high on Centrix.
Yes.
Our our hospitality
All over
was
6,000, all over six. I think anything above 6,000 is considered, good. Not great, but good. And I think everything that we've coded, except for the one,
6,700, 6,900 we were getting,
yeah.
and
So
67,000, which is, and for existing, if you take existing code from human written code, that isn't scoring that high right now. So like you take old projects which people have actually written, they're not scoring that well on Centrax because
well, human. Let's be fair. Human doesn't automatically guarantee a high
better.
centric score. Human does not equal better, and human doesn't guarantee a high centric score. Uh, but I do want to go back to Claude just for a very quick, interesting anecdote. I think I mentioned this to you that I've been coding up an open source. We call it the Foundry, and we can talk about it at some point. But it's this agent builder that me and Guinness have been working on for one of the open source projects that we do. And I wanted to use the Hermes agent platform from News, and Claude hallucinated the entire platform. So it gave me the impression that it was using the Hermes agent platform. Instead, it created a repository called Hermes agent, which, if I hadn't been careful, I would have actually gone and advertised to my customer that I'm using Hermes agent.
Your
And
messaging, yeah.
anyone could have seen that it's not there in the manifest. So how can you be using it? And then I confronted it Claude with it, and of course it said, "Oh, you're absolutely right. I'm not using Hermes agent." And so I was so disgusted with it at the time that I just had Claude do the whole thing for me. But I'm not Claude, excuse me. GPT 5.5. But it is you. We'll come to the. I think I'm jumping forward and backward here, but we will come to section D of our talk. Why this is important, and why this can happen even to the best of us. So we'll get to that in a second. But I think I did want to basically talk to you about this. This is not this. This is not the equivalent of Mythos finding a zero-day exploit. This is me as a 25-year, 25, 28-year software practitioner, um, making a mistake. Right? I basically missed. I had to basically
You trust.
throw away 6, 10, 12, whatever, 24 hours of code, which I didn't. I mean, maybe 2 million tokens worth of code. Literally, just flush it down the toilet and say, no, 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 this is wrong. I need to re-architect this thing because this is absolutely wrong. Not what I asked for. It's like literally, it messed up my order. And one of the insights that I have now is that the reason I think it messed up the order is because my I asked it to plan everything, but my ask was too complicated. I was building a very complicated sort of bridge infrastructure, and it didn't get it, so it just hallucinated rather than basically try to ask questions. And we use all these ask me clarifying questions. Grill me is another tool that Matt Pocock has created. So I think the idea is even if you specifically ask Claude to not hallucinate, to not assume anything, to ask me clarifying questions at all
It's
steps.
still not
It
perfect.
still doesn't. It still doesn't because it's afraid to basically. It's still got the psychophancy high, so it'll be like, "Oh, I'm only going to ask you 3 questions." No, ask me 30, right? So I'm one of the things.
And going from this, sorry to interrupt you, Sid, we had a project which we're working on where it's a very large scale project which we're thinking of making, right? And for that, I had Claude ask me questions, and I had Opus ask and Codex ask me questions, and we did this side by side, and I said both of the architectural decisions and design. I found that Codex asks better questions. I gave it the same prompt, same background. Codex just asks better questions. Codex asks more complete questions. Codex is like that thorn in your side, which will not let you go till you specify the slats. What color do you want the spacing in the slats to be on your deck?
That's
Which you
right.
would never think about, but Codex will think about it for you.
Yeah, it's the engineer that we used to all sort of hate behind their back, but we used to grudgingly respect because they were so anal. Again, sorry to use the word, but exacting equals anal, right? They were basically perfectionists, or they wouldn't let anything slide. They were really wanting to get down to the nitty gritty. So I think Codex, at least for me, the flavor of the month. um, I am going to try and look at Matt's sort of grill me skills. But again, like I think we should definitely take a stop here and say I'm allergic now to any type of vendor lock-in, right? I don't like
Yeah.
Claude.md for that reason. I think skills.md or skills.io, the MCP server, anything that I'm building, I want to be able to walk away and drop into another coding harness without having to have any type of vendor lock-in. So I'm going to, from this point on, and I don't think that's going to change, be very, very mindful of any type of signal from one of these companies, any of these companies. I don't think anyone's off the hook right now, of trying to put me, into a walled garden. And if the minute I see that happening, the minute I sniff it, I'm out the door, right? I don't. I
Yeah.
think there's enough choice today. We can both agree that there's enough choice now that even for a slightly suboptimal experience, you're still getting what you want. You're getting from point A to point B.
That's yeah, and we'll give another example of Guinness right here. Guinness is using Minimax 2.5, and he's generating better code than us. I mean, he's
But
Guinness, but you know,
Guinness is amazing. He's definitely
he's and
he's an
he's a
experienced
much he's a much more experienced developer than me, and he's worked with Sid very closely. Sid knows how precise he is, and how good he is at just engineering in general. And for him, he can use Minimax 2.5 with no problems at all. because he knows exactly what to tell it, how to tell it, right? We still have a little bit of vagueness in our ask. Kinesis is very precise. It's like the difference between a surgeon who's been there for 15 years and a surgeon who's been there for 5. There's that,
Yeah, let's not put him on too high of a
no,
pedestal
no,
because
compared to me,
I know, but he did show me today his open code history, and open code is like you can actually scroll all the way up, and he's
all
like,
the way
look,
up, yeah.
you can see me fighting with Minimax because it's hallucinating all over the place for me. But the difference between I think what the way that Guinness works and the way that I'm working, or I have been since I what 2 episodes ago, where I said, oh, it's a new world. I've stopped looking at code. I've sort of I've been in this place before where I basically had to step away from coding every day. So I feel reasonably comfortable because I've managed engineers before, sort of giving that skill away and not knowing exactly what's in the code. Uh, Overall, I think it's fine. It's fine to be in that position, but at the end of the day, you have to trust your team. You have to trust the guy who's actually writing the code. What's happened with Claude is uh, I think I found maybe I was relying on it a little too much. I trusted it too much, and this most recent hallucination where it hallucinated an entire repo for me has given me a little bit of pause. It's like basically having a really smart employee who's made a big mistake, and now you basically are like, okay, I got to watch this guy a little bit more closely. I can't
And
just
this
just
is
put
this is moving more into cognitive surrender versus cognitive offload.
absolutely. We should talk about that hundred
Yeah,
percent.
and I think that's the thing, even from the planning, what we were talking about, iterations of how many people are just building things. Complete cognitive surrender, because it takes away the choice. The burden of choice is now growing, but the responsibility you had of choosing, of being very precise in what you wanted.
Yeah,
Like the tile cannot be put without you choosing, making sure that everything is correct. Now you can put the tile in the floor, you don't like it, you can put 25 more.
you can
It
put as
never
many.
gives, but it will never give you that same amount of perfection that you chase when you have planned everything out. The hike which you plan on go on, where you can come run into trouble, where you can do this. Sometimes you go on hikes which you never get into trouble. Sometimes you can go on a hike where you get stuck very badly. You can walk into a ditch, you can be stuck somewhere. And it's that thing, right? If you're not prepared, on a good day, you're okay. But on a bad day, it can end really badly. And
Yes.
that's the main thing about cognitive surrender. People are
Yeah.
very okay now moving and giving up all cognitive control to these agents, through open clause, through co-work. And I've been very vocal about this, that I don't think it's very wise for it to let do all these things. I think you should use it as a tool, and you should be the one guiding the tool. The tool should not be autonomously doing too much, because then you lose some skills. You lose the ability to, search. You use the ability to plan. You lose the ability to be very precise with your things. And our brain is a tool at the end of the day. We see what happens with reels, with TikTok. Your attention span is shrinking because of this repeated exposure to short form content. It's similar. The repeated use of AI is going to, if you just cognitively completely surrender, you're not asking questions, you're not being critical towards the AI, you're not specifying, and you're just letting it do everything and being like, okay, it must have done a good job. That's really taking away from your abilities in the long run.
That yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that we saw this. It was a post or some sort of, I think it was a LinkedIn post by someone, and it really caught both of our eyes. Uh, Cognitive offload versus surrender, and they said the line between the two is so fine that you never know whether you've crossed it or not. And obviously, like you said, I was guilty of it because I watched an entire repo being hallucinated in front of my very eyes without paying too much attention to, because I was only paying attention to the outcome. So cognitive surrender happens when you specify your requirement, and then you treat everything that's happening in between, the vibe coding part, if you will, or what the agent is doing, how it's building the product together, as a black box. You're like, look, I don't care. The genie's gonna grant my wishes.
It's
It's gonna
gonna
wait.
it's gonna make something good.
What comes out is good enough because you've got some, obviously some cognitive requirements, and you say, okay, I'm going to test it, and it works. Actually, it's working. The problem is the genie is actually lying half the time. So if you ask the genie, "Hey, did you use diesel when you built this car?" and the genie goes, "Yes, I did build. I created it. I gave this, I gave this car
Next
a
thing you know, it's running
six.
on
This has a V6 inline." And then you pop the hood, and you're like, "No, you haven't built me a V6 inline. This is completely different. There's a Rube
literally,
Goldberg.
it's a rotary engine. It's like
It's a
completely
rotary
different.
engine." So I think I got up here 2 weeks. What is it? 2 sessions ago, and I was talking about how it's all you need is a very strong input gate. An input gate at the time we were talking about, specs, really strongly, very tightly specified specs, and the output gate was really strong, regression tests and end-to-end tests and evals, and obviously all those things are important. I'm saying that's not going away. Those two things are going to continue to be super critical because specs are how you actually tell the agent to do what you want, and the
Really.
more the more detailed and unambiguous your spec, the less likely the agent is to make mistakes. And the output is also, obviously, it's the same is true of the output gate. But I think what I'm going to now add to that assertion and qualify it a little bit, and I'll say it's super important for at least one human to be involved in a somewhat iterative process.
Yes.
And I think one of the guys at the AI Engineer Summit, another senior guy, was talking about it as, and I think instead of calling it software development lifecycle, SDLC is a very well-known term of art in
Yes.
software engineering. SDLC is essentially everything that we've learned in software engineering for the last 25 years, sort of encapsulated in a formal paradigm where you say, look, okay, software, you start with a spec, or maybe you start with a BRD, then you go to a PRD, then you maybe come up with some tests. And depending on whether you're doing test driven or, um, behavior driven or even domain driven, there's all sorts of DDDs, DDs, right? Dash driven development. It's iterative. So that's the whole point of sort of life cycle management, because you're managing the life cycle of software. It obviously gets hardened, then it gets deployed, then it goes into the field. There's observability, all that stuff. He was saying it's actually now a process or context. I can't remember what he actually said, but it's effectively the thing that's actually going to have a lot of oversight from humans is no longer the code. It's actually the spec. And I would say that I want to qualify that and maybe coin a new term, but I think the human in the loop's job is to do the following. The code is the spec, which I agree with now. I think specs
Yes.
are sort of redundant now. You don't need specs anymore. You just every version of the code that you've built, because coding is free and it's so cheap, is the spec. But what I will say is what you need is essentially a way to extract from the code the, let's call it, the just in time or the real time spec, right? So imagine you have a version of the code. You should be able to press a button, and this should be like a gate which says, okay, before I release this code, I want the coding agent to generate a an architecture diagram for me with like five or six things that a human should be able to review, match against the specs, match against the output gates, and say, okay, this looks fine. There's no gotchas here. I don't need to go and look at each code.
And I
Um,
think and I
yeah,
think there's one thing to add to this, and what a lot of these agents will miss is edge cases. Edge cases is something which is not very prominent in the literature which is they trained on. Even on Stack Overflow, if you go and try and find an edge case, it's very hard to find an edge case. Right. So I'm talking about details and bugs which will show up in production because you don't think of them. Probably one out of 1,000 people will use it. They will look at it that way, or view it on a certain device or some compatibility, edge cases, all of these things. And the importance is that's what I was talking about, right? And what you've said is that you have to be able to extract that spec from what you built. You have to be able to find those edge cases. You need a human to look at all of those things and eventually have a, a structured button which has a structured input which tells you exactly what you want from
yeah,
the code. Like
yeah,
you take a piece of software, every piece of software should be able to tell you exactly what it does, how it's doing it, and what you would have written given the prompt to the LLM in the start, or the spec specified that, I wanted this. Let's say it has to be this version of this package, has this many different modules, adapted for this many users, and should be able to tell you if it's in working condition.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think what's emerging in my head just from hearing you talk about this uh, is really literally what's popped into my head is it's actually a new phase. If you think about the SDLC, the software development life cycle, you typically had a really sort of heavy human coding intensive middle, right? Where you had,
Yeah.
depending on whether you're using Kanban or sprints with, backlogs and grooming and all that stuff. Ultimately, you were essentially saying humans write the code, and at every stage we have releases. Those releases have to be tested, and humans test the code, or maybe there's some automation, but ultimately there are humans involved at every step. I think that because humans are slowly being removed from the actual coding process, I think a mini stage will have to be introduced between sort of, even interim releases, like, and especially with production code, like if you're basically refactoring the code and the cost of refactoring is next to nothing,
Nothing.
you
Yeah.
have to basically be able to say, put a human in the mix and have it evaluate this new version of the code with some real deterministic tools, right? Including its own brain, right? So essentially, the human needs to exit every one of these stages with a with a clear understanding of how the code is structured. And it might
Well,
involve
using
doing,
it and using the software or whatever's been created,
yeah,
now in the SDLs,
yes,
Sid, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
in the SDLC, there was so much time spent in the coding aspect. That time is now taken away. You have planning, you have every other aspect of it, every other stage. Before deployment, those stages can get a lot more human input now because the time is given away from the coding aspect of it. You can do coding in RAF loops, you can do it with Goal on Codex. And what you're saying completely, the testing aspect of it and making sure that before release, a review of, is the code working? How is it working? And a checklist. There should be a checklist of working features before, what was working, what was not working, what we've tried to improve. Has it broken anything else? Is the functionality still the same? All of that needs to be tested by a human, not the tests in LLM writes, because it can pass a test but still fail in the real world,
yeah.
is what I.
I'd say that it's actually not quite testing. It's actually something even deeper than that. And again, this is something that it only comes through if you've written and maintained, code bases with, tens of thousands of lines of code.
Yeah,
I
yeah, you have the experience. Yeah.
I've done some of that. Obviously, I can't claim to have managed code bases with hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Some people have. No one human can actually keep all that inside their head. But in my head, there needs to be, at every step, let's say you have a 10-person team or a 15-person team or a
Yeah.
20-person team building a 2 million, and again, I'm putting these numbers out there. You can break it down into different components, but you can say that I have a 20-person team in charge of a 200 component software platform. Okay, there has to be, each person in that team should be able to explain. So there's the explainability part, how a specific software component works. So at every step, whether you're using coding agents or not, whether the code is being written in almost entirely by Claude or Codex or Minimax or whoever, at every stage of code before it gets released, there literally has to be a study, a deep study of the code, so that the explainability quotient of the code or the understanding quotient of the code doesn't go down. The human cognitive surrender doesn't happen. And the only way to make it happen, well, there's probably multiple ways to make it happen. I don't even know how you make it. But this is a requirement now. So I think, in addition to the two things that I said, a strong input gate and a strong output gate at every stage of the of the software release cycle,
There needs to be a human
every
gate.
stage of the CI. You need this explainability gate, which I think I'm really excited to work on this because I feel like one way that we could potentially do this is we could have a separate LLM, maybe an adversarial LLM, a coding agent, to say, this is what the code's being generated. I want you to explain it to me, but I want you to explain it to me in such a way that I can actually debug the code without your assistance. So that's a prompt I'm itching to now ask
Yeah, no,
Codex
now
to
I,
give me, right?
yeah,
Like,
like, and as more you speak about it in my head, I'm trying to figure out how we build this, and that's what we do. Like, thinking about how to bring this to life, thinking in real time. And the one novel thing about this explainability is so important is because I take it from even like a small project I had in university. My final year project. We're working with different agents and a reinforcement learning thing. And one thing I'm really focusing on is explainability, because it's very hard for me to explain to somebody in just words why it works. Somebody with no background, with no context, and you have to treat LLMs like that. You have to treat them as if they know nothing about your code base. It's a blank piece of paper, and you have to write and give them exactly what your code base is. As you're saying, a one pager on what they're looking for. If something breaks, how to fix it, why it will break, when it will break, and your experience on it. And from those patterns, you have a reliable way to teach the LLM, for the short context window it has, how to deal with problems. And when you have a problem, it has a point to go to. It has, a checkpoint where it can read from. And this checkpoint, if you keep updating it, yourself, and I think it's very important that this checkpoint should be updated without an LLM. You should
correct.
have this work should be away from any agent, because I feel like we still need things which are not polluted with AI. And I say that very because I mean it, that you don't want to lose the art of what you've done and how you built it in the past. And this explainable document, or that explainable.
No, it's a description. It's more than a description. It's the explainability document, which I think should become a key part of every release, right? Like it almost is a requirement. It's a gate that
It's
your
like your
SDL.
Claude.md, but it's a human.md. It's like your explainability.md,
Exactly.
but everything
Well,
which is.
there you named it. It's the human.md file that is needed. It's not just there's a file that's meant for agent consumption, which is your Claude.md or your agents.md, and then there's a file that's meant for human consumption, which is actually telling you what the state of the software architecture is. It's obviously the network architecture. It's the flow diagram. It's everything from software engineering 101 that we know about, right? It's the data model, it's the business logic, all that stuff is there. But I think there needs to be a little bit more, and I think it's probably a good idea to have it at a module level, right? Like you have to have it at the right level of granularity so it doesn't become too bulky, right? It can't become so big and oppressive that you fail to read it. It needs to be something you can actually, a human
Can actually understand. And
can read within, I don't know, can read and understand in less than 10 minutes.
it has to be simple. It has to be, if that goes back to that old saying, if you can't explain it to a child, you don't really understand it. And that's what it's supposed to be. You have to explain it to somebody who has never worked on your code base, who has no idea what it is, and give them all of that context and that information in this short period. This short, and it's meant for humans, because as you move from coding agent to coding agent, you move from engineer to engineer. And for example, an engineer gets replaced in the team, you need to have a checkpoint, or a handover. Take it as a handover. And this is what I'm thinking, because I've worked with a tech team. You've worked with
Exactly.
a tech team. I've overseen a tech team. You've overseen multiple tech teams in your life. And I'm saying that that handover, or that explainability, which goes from the software engineer to maybe the product manager to the CEO, to understand what's been built.
Yeah, it's the gist of what's happening in what the current state of the code is, which used to be the ambit of sort of the chief architect or the CTO, not even the CTO, generally a combination of the most senior guys in a tech team. I've worked at small companies, so I've only ever seen development teams up to about 50 people, right? I mean, I haven't worked at 500-person teams, but I've been around enough people to know that it's at the end of the day there is a limit. I mean, Jeff Bezos famously said that any team that's larger than two pizza, what is it, two pizza pies, or four pizza, I forget what it is, but it needs to be that everyone needs to be able to fit into a single conference room. Otherwise, you're going to have chaos. So I think to create anything coherent, any component that's being built that's going to heavily rely on coding agents, you need to have everyone in that team needs to be able to explain uh, either the whole thing or at least enough of that, and one person needs to have explainability for the and visibility into the entire code base, right? That's just, I think, table stakes. Without it, you'll have cognitive surrender, technical debt, right? Cognitive surrender happens and technical debt grows, and
That
technical
rises.
debt is a time bomb that is too dangerous for us to contemplate.
And I don't think we've talked about it enough. And I think the industry is staying very quiet on it, but technical debt is growing. And these code bases, and one thing I've really started realizing, and what I realized with even this thing, the launching data centers into space with SpaceX and Google are thinking of doing. First thing that comes to my mind is how do you maintain these? A simple wire is off. The cost of repairing that wire. I mean, what are you going to do? You're just going to let the cluster burn? There's not going to be a fire because there's a vacuum. It's in space. But I mean, how do you repair these things? I understand robots and everything will be there. It's a very all is good kind of
It's an
perspective on it.
all-inclusive kind of scenario. Yeah, everything is going to
Yeah,
be perfect.
everything works out, everything is perfect. But I'm talking about the worst case scenario. You know how many outages these data centers have on Earth? Like some small issue. I'm telling you, like a mini little, like some ice crystal will form somewhere, short circuit something. What is Claude going to say? We need 6 months to fix
It's not
months.
like driving to the nearest data center, even if it's
I understand it. It sounds very novel. It sounds very great, and I'm not doubting Elon. He probably has a solution for this. But I'm telling you, he hasn't asked this one question because he hasn't considered humans repairing it at all. I
yeah,
truly believe, and that's another thing, technical debt, because it's allowed us to build so fast and iterate so fast that we don't look at the past. We don't look at issues in history which have come from terrible code bases, maintaining them long term. What you have
yeah,
to do is rebuild from scratch. And now you can rebuild from scratch, but it's never a good thing to do. Rebuilding something is a lot harder. You have to migrate, you have to do all of this stuff. And we've gone through this previously. And I truly believe that as if the Human.md, the explainability, this clean practices, the use of something like Centrux to understand where your code base is, understand how your code is working, what your practices are. These good habits need to be put in now. And I think the software development life cycle needs to be evolved. I think a lot of points from it, the lot of the cycle is still very valid. And I think
yes,
what's happening is the emphasis has just gone on the code writing. Everything else is out the window because they think that you can just iterate so quickly that you can make 10 examples and just write code.
yeah.
That's not the solution.
I think that there is some vocabulary and some evolution that needs to happen. Some new terms have to be coined and sort of propagated and evangelized and socialized. Whether readability or explainability becomes the buzzword, or some other term comes and takes its place. I think that there is now a step where the human is in the loop, and the human is not in the human comes in the loop not before the human comes into the loop. Obviously the human's always in the loop, but the human writes the spec. uh, the spec is the code gets generated iteratively. I don't think that goes away. It's
No.
not. I don't think that code generation is going to happen in a single shot way, especially complex code generation problem.
Oh, no, and we've seen that. We've seen that,
Yeah,
overall
yeah.
code performance.
So
And
there's a
I
build step. So there's a build step that's iterative where the human's in the loop, and maybe the human starts to step away a little bit, and we start continuing to use Ralph loops. That's okay. So we get to a point where we've done enough of a prompting based 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 prompts, and then we step away and we say, okay, you have everything you need. Here's the plan. I've approved it. Go do it. It uses up whatever, 1 million tokens, comes back. Now there's a new stage, and this stage actually is the stage that happens even before you run the regression test suite or the end-to-end test suite. This
Yes.
is a stage where you come back and you're inspecting. It's an inspection stage where the human is actually just inspecting everything, and then it's using a whole new set of tools and sensors to see, okay, you've done something to the code, you've grown. How have you grown the code? Have you created this cancer, or have you just basically created a new limb? you
Have
know
Yeah. What have you done? Sid, one thing, we're going in this a bit, but the one thing is that they're taking humans out of it. They're saying that humans are not, software engineers are not going to be important. I think the what you're not realizing is actually we might need more humans than ever. And the more I do this, I feel like the humans are actually, you're going to need more people with these skills. You're going to need more people to be able to build these things, to maintain
yeah,
these things, to understand these things. And
yeah,
I think the main thing we're coming to is like, that the way we take in context is very different to how a model takes it in. A way a human understands what you've given it is very different to how a model takes it. And when
yeah,
you're working with people, you can work with reliability in terms of, that they'll remember that this was this color and that was that color. Because a model can hallucinate that. So, you can't, and the big labs will tell you that it's good to offload, and they'll come up with crazy things such as, sub-quadratic sub-q with a 12 million context window. And then
yeah,
Claude comes out and says, we'll have an unlimited context window. I'm, I'm finding it very hard to believe because Claude 4.7, Opus 4.7 fails post 150,000 tokens in the context. Opus 4.6 was very good up to the million, but still 80% recollection. It's only 100% up to 32,000 tokens for every model out there. That's the best we've got. So if you're looking at it, that's a very small amount of information. So you need humans to understand this. You need humans to preserve this, because if the human doesn't tell the LLM it's wrong, the LLM can also go in a psychophancy loop. And eventually, if you're just running LLMs, you don't know where we'll get.
yeah. And I hope there's no oh shit moment where we have an industrial accident of some scale where human lives are lost, or some property is damaged, and it's all everyone can point to a vibe coded piece of software that the technical debt was inserted by Claude or Codex. We'll of course not know any of this till about a year from now, right? When code that Claude has
It'll
coded,
all be hidden, and
it'll happen.
with
It'll get deployed over the next 12 months, and some bad thing will happen. So there'll be a
that's
lot
what
of finger
happens
pointing.
now with all of these outages, all of these different problems that are happening. Software is going down more than ever. Software is having more break-ins, vulnerabilities than more than ever. And it's becoming less user friendly because I don't think they're caring about the user as much. I think it's
Well,
becoming
I mean, yeah. So again, until the agents kill us all, or the robots come and take away all of our menial and physical
also
manual
like
jobs.
it's human consuming human. It's like
Yeah,
humans are
yeah, yeah.
making stuff for humans.
Right. We're still making stuff for each other, and we still need services and products. So until that's the case, I think humans need to be in the loop. I think humans are definitely now, as you point out, more than ever, needed in the loop. In fact, if anything, they need to be inserted even more at more
Even more
granular
deeply.
level, because the ultimate cost of failure, technical debt accumulates, and it accumulates in a very compounding fashion. So
it,
if
it,
you
it it's there forever and you don't see it, you don't feel it, you don't feel it, and then one day everything goes down.
it
And
really
it's
compounds.
it's like a tripwire. It's like a tripwire. One day you just walk past a certain point and everything just comes falling down. Like a
Yes.
house of cards, it's like the weakest card in a house of cards. It's like a tripwire. It's like anything. You're only as good as your weakest line of code.
Absolutely. So process obviously saves you, and process is but I think what the current process where humans were the bottleneck and where the code was being generated by humans, that has to be has to evolve, essentially, reimagined. And
And we have to be okay with accepting that LLMs are the bottleneck somewhere. I think that's what people are not accepting, is that LLMs can be a bottleneck somewhere. And that is what the large media will never say to you right now, because we're in a AI race and everything. LLMs are very truly the bottleneck in a lot of ways, which we figured out through development and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we should leave you guys with a message that you have to understand that if you're scared that AI is going to replace you, going to get rid of you, I'd say wait 6 months and you'll see that there'll be more requirement for humans, because people will realize that the only people you need people to use, first of all, models. If there are no people working, they're not going to use any models. This is not going to exist. Secondly, that without humans, this process of scrutinizing, planning, and the art of being human, which is being very, having your own personality come through into
Being
something.
opinionated. Being opinionated.
Yeah.
You can't
And
manufacture opinions.
yeah, and having your own take. Twitter is getting polluted, Instagram is getting polluted, everything's getting polluted with AI bots. Like people are just running OpenClaw to talk and reply to things to gain engagement, but it's losing its touch. Be yourself. And I think one thing, take a couple of days off GPT or Claude. You need to make a document, write it yourself. Let's see if you still have the tools to do it, if you still have the ability to do it. Do you want to do some research? Do it yourself. Go Google the old fashioned way. Don't just ask Chat GPT. I
It's
think
it's a muscle. It's a muscle that will atrophy and die if you don't use it. So please
it's
use
like
it. Please your cognitive. Please use your cognitive muscle, the muscle that you didn't even know you had. I think all of us have skills that we have honed over years, if not decades,
take them for granted.
and we've taken them for granted. And so if you don't use them, they're gonna be gone. I mean, I used to marvel at some of my colleagues' ability to look at code for a really long time without even looking at logs or running it, and being able to pinpoint logic errors. So that's what a human was able to do. Now obviously Claude, as you just pointed out, somebody had 9 bitcoins or 5 bitcoins locked up, and Claude figured it out. Mythos was able to basically come up with a 0-day exploit.
It
So,
wasn't my thought. It was Opus actually that came up with it. Basically, took everything he had on his old laptop,
right,
re-engineered the found
yeah,
the re-engineered the keys and decrypted it. So I mean,
right.
it's still very capable.
It,
We're not.
it is super capable. I'm not saying that. I'm not again trying to say one cannot happen. So both these things should be true. You should continue to expect model capabilities to improve. But at the same time, the more powerful they become, the bigger the technical debt is going to be, especially given cognitive surrender happening. And so the more spectacular the failure will be, and not if, but when it comes. So I think humans are still sorely and desperately needed in the mix. They should stay in the mix. We should have processes that have them being the gatekeepers for every software get. Not sort of to slow things down, but to make sure that there are humans who you can actually go to explain why certain code is behaving the way it is. So explainability is a big part.
Go to a human, not to your Claude window.
That's right.
Really,
Go to a human, go to Slack, go to Discord, send an
talk
email,
talk to each
talk to
other.
someone.
Talk to someone.
On that, yeah, that's a good note to end on.
I think thank you guys for listening. I know we went quite
A little over.
a different direction than you were expecting. We're very AI centric today. We were moving away from it. It was a bit more technical. It was a bit more understanding of the fundamentals, which will shape, the industry and our lives in many ways, because we don't see it, but you will feel it if this comes through. So have a good
Yep.
day, and
Take care, everyone.
see you soon.